1 minute. Non.
C'est bon? Tout le monde on a le casque?
I'm gonna start talking.
Oui.
Yeah. Dans ma présentation, j'ai 2 exercices et une PowerPoint petite. Petite parce que le docteur, elle avait parlé très, très, très bien et très fort et je suis d'accord avec tout. Alors, il y a beaucoup plus que je peux dire. So, in the United States, we have an adversarial justice system. What that means is, like some of the previous speakers have said, is that somebody who's undergone tremendous, tremendous trauma now has to answer to a judicial system, and their story is now going to be questioned. And this is very difficult. Already we have a shortage of properly trained attorneys in trauma-informed care. And even with a trauma-informed care attorney, the survivor of trauma now is going to have to tell the story to an attorney. Hopefully, if we can find a doctor, to a doctor, if we can find and if the client agrees to a therapist, maybe to a psychiatrist, then they're going to be, again, questioned by the government attorney, the veracity of their claim questioned, and the judge, also, again, questioned. So you could see it's a very difficult situation to be in for somebody who survived trauma. They say attorneys have a big ego. And I think that in this situation, it could be a good thing, because for me, I want my client to win. I want to win. I want to win their case. But I also want, in the process, to see how this person, for whatever reason the universe has put this person in front of me, what other ability I have besides winning in court. How else can I win? How else can I support this person in front of me? So, as you mentioned, it is very important for the legal field to collaborate with the medical field if we can find the proper medical personnel to assist. So unfortunately, there is a big lack of medical and even therapists who are culturally informed, who are informed linguistically, or even informed about what is human trafficking. And so oftentimes it becomes also the role of the attorney to educate the medical field. And sometimes, because the medical field, they also have ego, if I dare say so. And so sometimes this is a delicate balance, a delicate situation, because I may say to the client, and oftentimes the client may not be ready actually to go see a psychologist. Maybe in their culture, to go to a psychologist might mean that they're crazy or it has a negative stigma. But for my case, I really need them to go see a psychologist. So if I'm able to properly explain this to the client and they agree and they see the therapist, I will then ask the therapist or the doctor to write me a report. Here comes a problem, because the doctor has his own training and his own intentions in writing a report, right? And so sometimes maybe the wording of that report might not just not be beneficial to me as an attorney to prove a case, it could actually even be a hindrance. Maybe the wording that he uses might not be the wording that is needed. For example, if the doctor says the client was harassed, this word, psh, the client is going to lose. So I need specific words. For example, instead of harassed, I need them to write persecuted, okay? But now I have to convince the doctor very nicely to please change the report to use the language that I want to be used. So there's a conflict there sometimes, yeah? Let's say I get a really good report. Another issue that can come up is inconsistency. Because it could be that the client says to the doctor, okay, I was raped 15 times. And the client comes to me then and says, I was raped 13 times. And let's say if the case is an asylum case and it doesn't get approved affirmatively and we have to go in front of a judge, in a court setting with a judge sitting up there with people accusing the client or not believing the client, how many times were you raped? 20 times. Psh, we have 3 inconsistencies, okay? And that could be a major reason to be denied asylum, for example. Right now, the denial rate for asylum is about, well, we have a 28% approval rate only. So it's a very low rate. So you could see how the collaboration is very important, but also could lead to problems. An additional problem, a doctor has been trained in medical school, has not been trained in how to be a witness in court oftentimes, yeah? So let's say I have the best therapist, the best doctor, now has to appear in court and has to answer questions. If the judge is adversarial, or for whatever reason the judge is aggressive, challenges everything that the doctor says, it could be, and unfortunately has happened, where the doctor or the therapist gets very flustered and is unable to properly withstand that type of questioning. So then again, it becomes the job of the attorney to properly prepare, to properly support the system. So it's a system that we hope can improve in the future, but right now there still is a lot of points of contention and conflict. But of course, having medical and therapeutic testimonies or reports could help with corroborating the victim's testimony and also corroborate and assist with a credibility determination. So we're talking about trauma. Yes, let's stay there. What is trauma? We've had a few really good reports, but in your own words, what is trauma? I'm gonna use the Socratic method and start calling on you guys if you don't volunteer. What's trauma?
It's tremendous. I don't know. I'm traumatized and I can't answer your questions.
All right, well, c'est quoi le trauma? All right, next slide. Here we have a very serious definition of trauma. We're not going to go into it too much, but trauma is a result of an event or a series of events that a person experiences that can have long-lasting physical, mental, spiritual effects on the person. And it's something that can transcend socioeconomic lines, gender, age, and next. All right, we're not going to do the next. And when we're dealing with a traumatized person, for me, I feel it's also very important to look at ourselves. Here we are put in front of a person who's undergone tremendous trauma. We're asking the person to put into words what they have experienced. And that by itself can be an oxymoron. by putting words to an experience of trauma, you're actually minimizing the experience. You could say, okay, I've been raped, I've been beaten. But those words in themselves do not reflect the entire experience on the person's psychology, physicality, spirituality. And so we're asking a lot of a victim in front of us to put into words what they've experienced. In addition to that, we all of us, we all also have our own traumas. Whether it's human trafficking in some cases, maybe childhood trauma, whatever we may have experienced, we all have suffered some kind of trauma. And now here we are in front of a person who's experienced trauma. How do we relate to that person? Dr. John said something very important. He was talking about resilience. And so I believe that in each instance that we have the honor, really, of being in touch with somebody who's undergone trauma. We also have the ability to help in the healing process, to help with resilience. And that can be even very simply by the act of being present. The previous speakers had already talked about, active listening. Sometimes I have people come into my clinics, for example, the domestic violence clinics, where they may not come back. They may not be ready to come back. They may not be ready to leave the abuser. And I only have one instance to be with this person. And so at that moment, how I show up with that traumatized person, I believe can make a huge difference in that person's life. I'm not claiming I'm God, I'm gonna heal everybody. I know I'm not responsible for that, but in that moment, there can be a tremendous amount of healing in that interaction. So that's gonna bring me to our first exercise. If we could go to the third to last slide. Okay, so in Zulu culture, in South Africa, there's a word called Ubuntu, which means humanity towards all. It's a concept of bringing each other into existence. The third to last slide. Third to last. Keep going, keep going. Almost to the end. Go, 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 almost to the end. Yep, okay. It's a concept of bringing each other into existence, remembering our true identity and the value of each human being, whether we're the lawyer, the doctor, the client, the social worker, the police, the journalist. We all have a collective responsibility and value. And the next one, so we're all gonna be doing an Ubuntu greeting. And the greeting is two parts. The first part, we're gonna actually all get up and do this with one another. I'm gonna demonstrate with the doctor. So the first person, we're gonna get up. The first person is gonna find another partner. And the first part is we're gonna look into each other's eyes. And by that, already we're establishing a connection, looking another person in the eye. Yesterday, I had several conversations, Iman and Amina, and they were talking about how connection, human connection, is one of the most important things in our work. So first, we're gonna look one another in the eye without laughing. Then I'm gonna say, I am here to be seen. Now you say, I see you.
I see you.
I see you.
I see you.
Now you say, I want to be seen.
I want to be seen.
I see you. No, then we go to the next person. So for the next maybe 6 minutes, I'm gonna ask you, and you could say it in English. I hope I did the correct translation in Arabic, Google Translate. We're gonna, for the next 6 minutes, get up, everybody. Get up, get up, get up, get up. And we're gonna find people And we're going to say, I am here to be seen.
I am here to be seen.
I am here to be seen.
I see you. I am here to be seen.
I see you. Okay? Vamos. You're doing it? Okay.
I'm here to be seen.
So random people. I want to go to random people and be like, weird to see you.
I am here to be seen.
I see you.
I'm here to be seen. I see you. I am here to be seen. I see you.
I'm here to be seen.
I see you. I am here to be seen.
I see.
I'm here to be seen. I see you. I'm here to be seen.
Looking at people's eyes. I do enjoy it. J'aime bien regarder les gens dans les yeux. T'es avec moi, Franck. C'est ça. Et je veux bien savoir l'exercice du macro, c'est quoi?
Voilà. Je suis très curieux. Elle me regarde.
Ah, et puis,
Elle me regarde.
ah non, je veux juste savoir.
I see you.
Do you see me? Hello.
Okay. How much time do I have? 10 minutes. All right. How do you all feel? I see you. Okay. All right. Thank you for being open enough to engage in this exercise with me. I'm just going to go briefly through the rest of my PowerPoint, and then we're going to do our last exercise with the Maghroub here. All right. We've been talking about the 4 P's this whole time. Now we're going to talk about the 4 R's of trauma-informed care. Next slide, please. Number 1, the first R is to realize. Who are you? At this point, we ourselves, as the service provider or the person in touch with a traumatized person, we take a moment to look inward. Who are we? Our sense of identity, of how we identify ourselves, informs how we're going to see reality, how we're going to see the story this person is telling us. For example, there's one judge in Los Angeles who, we don't know what her story is, but I think that she may have been a victim of domestic violence. So any case of domestic violence comes before her, she says the client is lying. I deny the case. Okay? So very important for us who are on the side of the client to look at ourselves and who are we? What's our own identity? What types of biases, what kinds of judgments do we already come with through our own history? Next. The second R is recognizing trauma. Just take a moment to look at, these are just some forms of trauma. And I think what's important to realize, or what I've seen, is that a victim of human trafficking oftentimes it's not just an isolated incident of that's the only form of trauma that they've experienced. Usually it's a multi-level form of trauma. So they may have experienced poverty, they may have experienced being ostracized, of being judged, of maybe sexual violence at home, maybe child abuse at home, or witnessing domestic violence. So there oftentimes are various layers of trauma. Okay, next. And something that is a little bit new, I think, in the field of trauma, or maybe you can say differently, but it's something called historical trauma. And the way it's a multi-generational form of trauma. A lot of the data from historic trauma comes from studying the Holocaust and studying of how even 1, 2, 3, now they're looking at 4 generations after somebody who survived the Holocaust might still be exhibiting forms of trauma. That even their DNA may have been altered from 4 generations past to be more open to triggers to trauma. And in our situations, also thinking about how poverty, for example, maybe generations of poverty, generations maybe of belonging to a tribe that has historically been seen as a tribe of lesser value. What type of trauma does that inflict on somebody's psyche? Next. How we respond to trauma. The previous speaker had already talked about the importance of listening and of being patient, and that it takes time for a client to come forward and tell their whole story. I think we have to also realize that that human trafficking, it's an issue of power and control, and the clients' power and control over their own lives, when they can eat, when they can sleep, when they can wake up, what they can wear, what they could say, when they can go out, when they can come back, when they can sleep, wake up, everything has been taken away from them, right? And so here they may be in my office, and what are some ways in which I can, in my interaction of having to get their story and try and help them legally, how can I, in that moment, work on those issues. So one of them is being patient. And what I try and do before, especially on a day when I have like multiple clients, I really try, I'm not always successful, I try and like take a moment to take some deep breaths myself so that I could actually be ready to see the person and to be able to get to a point of trust with them. And to also recognize power dynamics, okay? All of you guys here are in a position of power, okay? We're lawyers, we're educated people, we're in a position of power. Oftentimes, the clients are not in a position of power. And how does that affect our relationship? How can we give them back some power? So it could be something very simple, like, do you want the door to the office open or closed? Do you feel comfortable sitting on this chair, or do you want to sit on this chair? Do you want a glass of water? Tell me when you need a break. Little things like that can actually help a lot in building trust and in giving the client back a sense of security and value. Next slide. Here, next slide. Here's some best practices. We already went over some of them. You know, offer options in the physical space, making the client feel comfortable. Explaining things to them in advance. There's a term for that, psychoeducation. So yesterday, Barbara did such a good job with the client in the middle and then all these people around. And to us, since we're from the outside, we know that's the lawyer, that's the doctor, that's the judge, the prosecutor. We know all the players. We know how the system works. But to somebody who is the client, they may be confused about who's who has what role. So psychoeducation is explaining the process to them, okay? So my name is Daliah. I'm going to be your attorney. These are the things I'm going to be doing with you, okay? I'm going to be asking you about your story. I'm going to be taking notes while I'm talking to you. So please don't think I'm rude, that I'm on the computer taking notes. I'm listening to you, if that is what I have to do. Explaining that, okay, today I'm going to be meeting with you for 1 hour, and then we're going to make an appointment for next week for another hour, so that the boundaries are set and the client kind of like knows where to find themselves in that space and time. Another important thing is sometimes the client thinks that, oh, I'm the attorney, and so I know better. And so I'll ask them, you know, something. I'll say, oh, you know, you said that, is it true that you had to sleep on the floor without a blanket and without a pillow? And then they're like, yes, yes, yes. And then the next time they come and they say that they actually had to, you know, sleep in a bed with 3 other people. So then I'm like, but last time, didn't you say this? So they're like, they think that because I'm the lawyer, like they have to say yes to what I'm saying, right? So giving them the power to negate what I'm saying. And then helping the client get grounded and present, and healthy boundaries. So healthy boundaries being, you know, I don't give out my cell phone number. I don't talk too much about my own situation. When they tell me something like very shocking, you know, I don't go, oh my God, that's horrible. You know, acknowledging, you know, yeah, that is difficult what you went through, but now you're here. You're here in my office. Practicing grounding, even something simple as having them sit, taking a breath, having their feet on the floor, taking deep breaths, so that they don't, when they get flooded with emotion and with remembering their experiences, so that it's not re-traumatizing. Okay, next. Resisting re-traumatization, which several people have already talked about prior to me, so I'm not going to go into that too much. Basically, the most important thing, having a non-judgmental attitude and tone when we're working with a client. And to realize that even though the client has to tell their story over and over again, that definitely what you guys said, this is re-traumatizing. But the manner in which we do that can actually be part of the healing process, which I think somebody else had already mentioned. Let's get to the final thoughts. The next one. And these are just some existential things that come up for me, feeling, maybe guilt or feeling that I'm so responsible now for what's happening and getting a lot of anxiety. Oh my God, am I going to win this case? Like, what if the person gets deported? What if I can't help? So really also like working on myself and realizing that, we don't know why the world is this way, why things happen to people. And we're not responsible for fixing things, the world, the people, but in a moment, we do have a lot of power to be present. So now comes the last exercise, finally to eating. So I want you, we were talking about 5 minutes, yes, for sure. We're talking about human trafficking, and we've talked about how human trafficking is exploitation of labor or commercial sex. And how it's not just, like somebody's said before, it's not just villainizing the trafficker. They're out there, it's the other, How are we all involved in contributing to trafficking? Who makes our clothes? Where does our food come from? Not saying we're human traffickers, but there is a chain and we're all linked in it, right? We're not so far removed from the problem or from the trafficker. And we're really in a time where we're very disconnected from one another. We're disconnected from, how things are made, our clothes, our food. And so we're gonna right now do a little exercise in mindfulness, which basically the definition of mindfulness is the quality or state of being conscious or aware, a mental state achieved by focusing on one's awareness on the present moment, while calmly acknowledging and accepting one's feelings, thoughts, and bodily sensations. We're going to do that through eating. So I'm going to ask you to take your, what is it called, maghroob? Makroud. Okay? We're going to take a moment and please take a look at the food in front of you. Just take a moment and observe the food. What does it look like? The color, the shape. And take a moment to think, where does this come from? Where did this pastry come from? What are all the ingredients in this pastry? So take a moment to think about the earth where the fruit that's inside of this pastry was grown. The sun that had to shine for the fruit to grow. The water that was needed for the food to grow. The farmer that was involved in farming the food. The person then that transported the food from the farm to wherever it was processed, the bakery. The baker who was involved in making the food. The person who sold us the food. I want you now to pick up the food, pick it up in your hands, and feel it. What does it feel like? Just notice. What does it feel like? Now take a moment to smell the food. Okay. Engage your physical senses. What does it remind you of? Does the smell take you back to any experience? Does it take you back to a place and time? Okay, now take a bite of the food. And before you chew it, just feel it in your mouth. What does it feel like? What sensations are you getting? Notice the flavor. And savoring each moment. And having gratitude for the food and for the entire process that got this pastry made and brought it here to us in this beautiful place. Thank you very much. That's it. So I have a lot of gratitude for being here. Thanks for listening.
Thank you very much.